The most fulfilling thing about making a basket is starting from scratch, and I actually like gathering my own materials, processing my own dyes, having hands-on from beginning, and then when you get done with your basket, you have that end product, and it's so fulfilling to be the whole thing from beginning to end. And I'm very proud of what I've done. I especially like learning traditional things because I've learned contemporary weaving also. But the traditional things like that dog basket, that basket would never be used for anything. It's what they call a wealth object. And I'm the only person that Bruce Miller taught how to do that. And he actually went to a museum to figure out how that basket was woven. When I started weaving, the only people weaving in our tribe was Mary Bridges, which is her great-grandmother, and Rosemary James, who was her daughter. And I made a basket one time and I took it over and showed it to Mary, and who did this? I said, I did. And it just, you could tell she was just moved to think that it was going to go on. Sharron and I were invited by Anna Jefferson to go up to Colshan, which is Mount Baker's Indian name. And she invited all her students from 5 different classes, and Sharron and I were the only ones that showed up. And she brought Fran James with her. So we go up in the woods, and Anna and Fran start singing the cedar song. Excuse me. Probably the most beautiful moment of my life. We're in a place where they're going to cut the cedar trees down so we could go all the way around the trees, and the trees were beautifully perfect. And I come out of the woods and I had one bunch sat on this side, one bunch on this side, one bunch in the front, and one in the back. And Fran and I came out at the same time, and she had just as much as I did. She went back in that woods and got another load just as big as the first load. She, just like a billy goat, just ran up that hill. She was the most amazing woman. And there's a little cabinet over there, and every basket in there her and her son made. I collected a lot from them. And they're the ones who nominated me to be a master weaver with the Washington State Arts Commission. I'm partially disabled. I broke my ankle when I was about 25, but when I get in the woods, it just all goes away, and I'm just in my element. I can go and gather, and again, you listen and you watch. And a lot of people go up there and they just dig in and they don't know what they're doing, and their bark doesn't come out perfect. I was taught to gather perfect. And one time I took Linda's brother and met up with Anna and Fran again, and he pulled this bark up off the tree, and then he was on kind of a little bit of a slope, and he jumped and he swung himself on that bark all around it. Came back around on the other side of the hill. It was just so funny, so funny. But I've taught all my kids to gather, and I think it's real important to have that knowledge, to keep it going. Although cedar is getting more and more scarce because I keep cutting it down, and gathering cattails. I gathered cattails in ditches everywhere you could think of for a long time, and Bill James told me, he said, Karen, make sure when you gather cattails that the water is moving. You don't want to be in a ditch where the water is just sitting because it's got the collection of contaminants from the road in it. Gotta listen. And I actually gathered sweetgrass and hoquiam, and that was nothing but fun. and you bend down and you put your hand almost all the way to the bottom near the mud and pull. And there were these white people and they were cutting it down with a knife. They destroyed that whole field. Because when you pull it up out of the ground, the mud closes over that root. When you cut it, that little stub that's left rots and rots the roots. I think for me, the importance of gathering was to have that knowledge, to know that you made that effort to really get in and learn right from scratch how to make a basket and other things. You give a prayer of thanks for the ability and the opportunity, and you thank the tree for giving you its skin, because you're actually taking the skin off that tree. And in our culture, you only took a strip this big from a live tree. And if that tree was not going to be harvested, you just took, and it grows back. And you can actually see trees that have been harvested like 10, 20 years. There's a little dent in the bark, in the roundness of the tree. But it does heal itself. Okay, when you take cedar off of a live tree, you only cut about a 4-inch strip section, and you make a cut, a little cut, maybe 2 inches, and you pull that up, and one side will be straight and one side will be crooked. So you make the next cut towards the straight, and that'll give you a straighter strip of bark. Well, I taught Sharron right from the get-go. She was learning at the same time I was. And then I started teaching right away. Randy Lewis was working at Daybreak Star in Seattle. It wasn't Daybreak Star then, it was just an Indian center. And he hired me to teach. I taught at Beacon Hill, West Seattle, and what was that third place? So I started teaching right from the get-go, and I've always taught. 45 years of teaching. And one thing that I'm very proud of, I went to the Hazel Peak Conference in May, and I'd say 25% of the teachers there were people that I taught when they didn't know anything. And that made me smile. It was just real heartwarming. So baskets have been my life. I think it has evolved now to the point where it's easy to find the teachers through Native colleges and organizations like the Northwest Native Basketweavers Association. There's Colville, and a lot of these tribes have basketry organizations now. I think if there's a desire to learn, there's resources for people who want that opportunity. It's just wonderful to see your friends and share the news and find out what's going on and see what they're doing. And I have nieces from Skokomish that I love seeing. I have friends and family from Chehalis, and it's just nice to see all those people that you learn to love. And I think the one thing I really like is seeing the kids learning, because we made it a special point when we started our basketry organization. We had a Children's Day. And we all volunteered. Every one of us that was involved in the organization at one time or another volunteered to teach those kids. And one year I was at Yakima, and they wanted me to teach a tule class. I didn't know a thing about tules, but I said, I'll give it a whirl. Well, I learned to make tule mats by teaching those kids. So it's a give and take thing, and the rewards are enormous. We used to always go to my grandmother. She lived over here on Valley Avenue, and we lived in the south end of Seattle. And she had baskets everywhere in her house. And I was there visiting one time, and I said, she wanted to go to the store, so they took her to the store, and I said, Graham, can I go in the back and look at your stuff? And I went and I picked up a thing of baskets. It was about that big, say 8 or 10 inches wide. There were 13 baskets in that stack. Some of them molded so closely I could barely get them apart. And I always wanted to make baskets. It was in my blood. And like my grandma said, I took to baskets like a duck to water. I volunteered every year for probably 10 more years. We had a volunteer component, and we still do. And they would make them purple t-shirts. And I've had a collection of purple t-shirts from being a volunteer. And even after I quit volunteering, I went and taught for nothing. I never charged. And I started helping Bruce Miller with his classes, making his kits and all that. I've just always been involved. Every year I go and I try to, if it's in an area and they do things different than what we do, I would take those classes. I know more different styles of weaving than the law allows. When I started making baskets, it filled my soul. And like I say, when you finish a basket and you look at that and you think to yourself, I did that, it just makes you smile and makes you feel good and makes you happy. I support the arts in all forms, but mostly baskets. And I had a little buddy in New Zealand, his name was Tiatiwe. And I bought Linda a backpack that cost $500, and I bought myself a basket that cost $800. And I told him, I said, Tiatiwe, I want you to know I'm buying these because I want you to keep weaving. He's still weaving. Yeah. And he was just a kid then. He was like 18, and he's probably 40-ish now. And it just fills my heart to know that I was part of his life. A good part. An encouraging part. And I've always tried to encourage my students to be weavers. I mentored Hala Peterson from her dad's Skokomish and her mom's Chehalis for 2 years. And Sharron and I walked into Evergreen one time, and there was a glass cabinet full of baskets, and she said, did you make those baskets? It was Hala that made them. She weaves just like I do. It's just fabulous to think of her sucking all that knowledge out of me and keeping it. And she's still weaving today.
I first started weaving when I was 20. I used to love teaching and passing on to others. When Denise was a little girl, she would sit down and make a basket when I made a basket. And she was very good. I consider her a master weaver just like me. It just really means a lot to me because it's important that you pass these traditions on. The coil style like this, it's relaxing, good medicine. Yes, we did. Cedar, cattails, sweetgrass. Well, spring and stuff, the cedars, it won't come off the tree. I love weaving. Good medicine, yep. Well, the fun is teaching and carry on the tradition to other people. You have to carry it on so that the traditions don't die. Mostly it was just me and my twin sister Karen. But then as we started going to conferences and stuff, we started knowing other weavers and enjoying learning from them. Do something simple. Don't try and do anything complicated because you're not going to get it done. Well, my twin sister and I are going to be featured weavers. We don't really have to do anything, but we just have to sit there and look pretty. I love the design of the canoe with the people paddling, and then on the ends is the whale. And I love the handles on it. And it's just comforting to make things like this. Well, you have this plating here, and this is twining where the red is. Yeah, I just love weaving.
Well, when you gather cedar, it's when you first have a really hot day in the year, so it could be different from year to year. It could be the 1st of May or the end of May, but you gotta have a really hot day, and it requires going in the woods, which is, for us city kids, was quite a chore. But I had a fabulous teacher. She made me buy the appropriate shoes. Don't go in the woods with tennis shoes on, or flats, or rubber boots, hiking boots, something to support your ankles. She always said you had to take care of your ankles, and you had to have good tools. I always carried a buck knife, and you clean the bark in the woods. You leave the outer bark at the bottom of that tree so that it can help nourish the soil and make more bark. And always do it prayerfully. Always. And I thank the Great Spirit Creator. I want to say well, as a matter of fact, we brought our culture back from nothing. Our reservation is one of the only reservations in the United States of America that is completely urbanized. The whole thing. So we had no culture. We were forbidden to have potlatches. We were forbidden to practice our cultural gathering and producing, and we were also forbidden to speak our language. My grandmother told the most heinous story about, she was put in boarding school when she was 8 years old, and a cousin of hers came to the boarding school, and he didn't speak English, and he of course was greeting his relatives and friends in Indian, and they were beating him for speaking the language. And they couldn't tell him, and they knew the language, but they couldn't tell him what he was doing wrong, because if they spoke the language, they would get beaten too. And I find that just vicious. So we brought our culture back from death. There was no culture here at one time. And we were put upon right from the beginning. They gave the Indians alcohol, and they brought alcohol to the treaty negotiations, and they did it on purpose. They saw that Indians had no resistance. It's not in our genes. So we were put upon. They wanted our land. And to this day, they still want our land. And we only own 1/10 of 1% of the property in America. But they don't want us to have that. It's real bad. 40-ish. And we had Weavers Conference at Evergreen College, and through the Washington State Arts Commission. And that's when they nominated and made the list of master weavers, and I was involved in that. And Colleen Ray, who was the birth mother of the NABA, asked us if we would start an organization, and they took nominations for the board, and Sharron wanted to wring her neck, who nominated me to be on the board. So and then we had a meeting, and Bruce Miller nominated me to be vice president, and he was president. And we served together for 3 years. Fabulous. It was just fabulous. Seeing it all go and take off and seeing where it's at now, it's just been a wonderful journey.